Hi, I'm Lillian. Welcome back to my channel, Ink and Pages. This is going to be my first reading vlog for the Buzzwordathon 2022. Buzzwordathon is a reading challenge slash readathon created by Kayla from Books and Lala, where she has made a prompt for each month of the year, and you can participate however you want. Like, there's not really any rules to it, but what I am doing is reading one book per month that fits that month's prompt. So for January, the prompt was who, what, when, where, why, or how, so like the question words. So I am going to be reading When the Tiger Came Down the Mountain by Nevo, because obviously it has when in the title. This is the second novella in the Singing Hills cycle. I believe that's what the series is called. I actually read the first book in this series, The Empress of Song of Fortune, last year, also for the Buzzwordathon. And I believe this book is going to have a very similar structure, in that it's going to follow this character called Chi, who is a cleric, and their job is to kind of travel around and collect stories and the history of this fantasy land the series takes place in. And so in the first book, Chi met a character who told them the story of the Empress of Song of Fortune. So I think in this one, Chi is going to meet another character who will tell them the story of When the Tiger Came Down the Mountain, except I believe that the character this time around who is telling the story is an actual tiger. And I got this book for Christmas, so not very long ago. It's so incredibly short, I'm pretty sure I could finish it within a single day of reading, and I really enjoy The Empress of Song of Fortune, and like everyone who's read this book has said it's just as good, if not better than that one, so I'm very excited to start it. So I'm now like a tiny way into this, and it is indeed a similar structure to The Empress of Song of Fortune in that it jumps between Chi and what they're doing and then the main story, so in this case the story about the tiger, except that this time, instead of Chi just like listening to and recording the story, they're kind of the one mostly telling it, which is interesting. And due to some of the circumstances around Chi telling the story, this book feels a lot more intense and like high stakes compared to The Empress of Song of Fortune. That one was a bit more gentle and like rolling along, but honestly I already love it. I love this world and how rich and real it feels, and honestly I would read like 100 more books set in this world and told in this way. I'm really enjoying it, and I'm only like 30 pages in. So I finished it. It's an incredibly quick read. I read it in one sitting and oh my god, I loved it. I think I actually loved it even more than Empress of Song of Fortune, which I didn't think I would, but this just it's so good. It's so good. It is a truly excellent little book that just like packs so much into 122 pages. It packs so much in, and it delivers every aspect of it perfectly. It is a perfectly crafted story, and kind of touches on, in terms of themes of the book, it talks a lot about the nature of storytelling and how a story can differ from its source material and how it could change, and then the different versions of the story that can exist in parallel depending on who is telling a story and also who they are telling it to. And that was all very interesting, and honestly there's probably lots of books and media out there that touch on this topic, but the only one I can think of right now is the new Little Women film, and how at the end it talks a lot about storytelling and like the right ending versus the true ending and all that kind of stuff. And yeah, it's like a similar discussion on storytelling, and I just love this. It is, I'm gonna give it 4 stars, and it is a strong 4 stars. It is a strong 4 stars. It is, I think, better than The Empress of Song of Fortune, but I also understand like why that one would be the first one in the series and then this would be the second book. Honestly, they're just so great. And I can now say, like, so when there's one good book in a series, you're like, oh, that's nice. And then when there's 2 good books, you can say that's a pattern. So this series is now officially a great series, one I love. And the 3rd book, which is called Into the Riverlands, and I believe comes out in autumn, I think, I can now say that's my most anticipated release of 2022. Like, it's official. That is the book I'm looking forward to the most now. just because of how much I love this one. So what a strong way to start off the Buzzwordathon in 2022. Last year I read Number 9 Dream, and it was, I'm not going to mince my words, quite shit and disappointing. I gave it 2 stars, but you know what? That was generous. It's too late to go back and change it now. What a great way to start the year is what I mean to say. What a great book. I'm going to go and add it to my shelves right now. It's always like a very satisfying moment for me when I take a book and I've taken it off my TBR section, and then I can read it, and then I can put it onto the rest of my shelves with the rest of my read books. Super satisfying. This is going on there now. It's me again, final clip for this book, I promise. Right, so I've come to my shelves. I'm going to put this on. Oh, look, here's the Empress of Salt and Fortune. We're going to put it next to it because they match and they're both got black spines. They can go in the black section together. How satisfying. Oh, we put it in. It's like 3 millimeters taller than Empress of Salt and Fortune. What is this? Genuinely, what is this? It's the same publisher, it's the same series, like they have the same cover design and the same format, but you've just randomly made it this much taller. It's driving me insane. It's driving me insane. I mean, I still like it, but just snip it off. Just scrape off the first. It's literally like 3 millimeters of difference, and it's thrown off the entire shelf. What the fuck's this about, Tor? What is happening? So the February prompt for the Buzzwordathon is to read a book with either a pronoun or a possessive pronoun in the title. So I have picked up I Am Not Your Baby Mother by Candace Brathwaite. The subtitle is What It's Like to Be a Black British Mother, which I'm pretty sure, you know, is what this book is about. I think it's a balance of her own experiences with pregnancy and motherhood while also being a black woman in Britain. But I think it's also got some bits which are like about black British motherhood in general in sort of a non-fiction-y kind of way. And it has been an absolute age since I read anything, I think, that could be classed as non-fiction. And I do really like reading memoirs. So honestly, if I'm right about what this book is, it's going to be the best of both worlds. I am reading this on the recommendation of both my mum and my sister, who both really enjoyed it and said it was really good. And so I'm very excited to start it. So I'm now about a third of the way into I'm Not Your Baby Mother, and I'm really enjoying it. It is what I thought it was going to be, so it's part her experience and then part general non-fiction. It has a lot of statistics in, but it's not boring. She does a really good job of sort of embedding them in the text in a way that feels interesting, which is hard to do with statistics, I think. But I'm really, really liking her writing. It feels very open and real and honest, and I really, really like that. So the book is named after this concept of baby mother, as in, you know, a woman who never was / is no longer my partner or wife, but has my children. And it's embarrassing to realise, but I did, that it is almost exclusively used for black women and black mothers. Like you wouldn't really, I think, hear a white woman being referred to as a baby mother. And the point of naming the book that is the author is looking at how the depiction of black women and black mothers is hardly ever accurate or fair or positive or seen as something to aspire to in the same way that white motherhood is. So this book is her giving her own real experiences of black motherhood and showing, as we suspected, how useless these racist stereotypes are. And I'm finding it really, really interesting because obviously I'm not a black British woman. I also don't ever want to be a mother. So it's interesting to read about these experiences that I have no experience of. And I'm definitely getting why this was recommended so highly by other people. So I finished I Am Not Your Baby Mother, and yeah, still really enjoyed it all the way to the end. Actually, she says a couple of times in it, like she'll talk about a personal anecdote, and at the end she'll say, oh, but this isn't my autobiography, and then she'll move on to something else. And whenever she would do that, I'd be like, oh God, I wish you would write an autobiography so that I would read it. Like, I really enjoyed hearing about her own experiences and her parents and her family and her partner and her children in this. And so like, I really wish there had been more of that even in this book. I would have really enjoyed that as well. You know, it's always interesting to read about someone else's experiences, especially when they write as well as this. And it's going to sound cheesy and obvious, but you know, as a white woman, I did learn a lot from this book. And I guess it's better late than never to learn about the different aspects of racism that like my own privilege has shielded me from. Like there are things I'm never gonna have to worry about that this book introduced to me. Like I'm never gonna have to worry about picking a baby name that's too ghetto, and I'm never going to have to worry about my postnatal care being affected by my race, other than the fact it's actually going to protect me and mean that I almost definitely get better care than black mothers like Candace. And actually that whole chapter where she talks about her birth experience, it feels wrong to say it was one of my favourite chapters, but it was one of the ones that had the biggest impact on me and that I thought was very important and actually really powerful. And like I said before, her tone of writing is so great. It's sort of intimate and engaging and conversational all at once, even when she's talking about like whole communities of people and not just about her own personal experiences. The last chapter in here is when she starts to talk about her experience founding Make Motherhood Diverse, which is this like online initiative that aims to decenter like the perfect ideal white mother from the portrayal of motherhood in the media. And don't get me wrong, that is a really amazing initiative, and I've read up on it a lot now since reading this book, but I just don't really enjoy reading about people's social media journeys and social media work, so that bit, it did lose me slightly right at the end of this. So overall, I really, really liked this book. There were a few moments that lost me just a little bit. So I think this is like a 3.5, I would say. And I know some people feel weird about rating non-fiction books like this, or like sort of memoirs like this. But my rating system is always based on how much I liked it. So it's like a purely personal rating, and it's only really useful for me. So I do rate books even like this, but if you don't like the fact that I rated it, hopefully you'll like the fact that I really enjoyed it, and I really, really highly recommend this. Even if you're, like me, not a parent, and even if you also, like me, have no plans on ever becoming a parent, I do think this is definitely worth picking up. So next we come on to March's prompt, which I'm actually filming this in April because I missed March. It got away from me. I'm behind schedule, but that's nothing new for the Buzzwordathon. The March prompt is to read a book with a location word in the title. So I guess this could be anything from like supermarket, field, school, kingdom, the actual name of a country. I think they're all fair game. I am, however, slightly interpreting this in a way that's useful for me because I'm going to be reading The Madwoman's Ball by Victoria Mass. So this is not exactly a location, it's an event, but in this case, the event is inextricably linked to a specific location. So I think that counts. In this case, the location is the Salpêtrière Asylum in 1885 Paris. This is a historical fiction novella about said asylum and the hysterical women of Paris, and then once a year they open up the doors and they invite lots of the Parisian elite to come and mingle with said mad women. This was definitely a cover buy. I've seen this advertised a lot around the place, so I immediately recognised it when I went into Waterstones, saw it on the buy one get one half price table and was like, yes, I know I want to read that. I've seen it everywhere. And then I realised after I bought it, I haven't actually heard people recommending this. I don't know if anyone thinks it's good, but the advertising just really got me and I bought it. So I'm really hoping this delivers and is as wonderful inside as the outer appearance of the book. So quick update on this. I am now exactly 2 chapters in and I have thoughts on them. The first chapter, I really didn't like it. I don't know what my problem was. It's very much a quintessential opening chapter. It introduces the setting, some characters, shows you what the writing style is going to be like, and it just did not grip me in any way. And even like 10 pages in, I was wondering, should I just give up? I mean, if I really dislike the first chapter this much, and that's a pretty good indication of what the rest of the book is going to be, surely. So I was really wondering, should I just abandon it and just pretend I never tried to read it in the first place? Should I just give up and not say anything? But then I read the second chapter and it was actually a lot more interesting. The second chapter introduces this character called Eugenie, and she and a nurse at the asylum called Guinevere, I think they're like the 2 main characters, and Eugenie is the one that's actually interesting to me. And I have to say that her character already, upon like first appearance, has made it a lot more interesting because it's going down a route I did not expect. And actually now, the more I read, the more intrigued I am about this book and what's going to happen. So, I mean, it's more than made up for the first chapter. I really don't know what my problem was, but I'm back. I'm into it. I'm liking it. Let's see how it goes. And I actually think it's been ages since I read a historical fiction book. Like, I always say, like, oh, my favourite genres are sci-fi and fantasy and historical fiction. But really, I genuinely can't remember the last one I read. I'm actually going to check my spreadsheet quickly and see what the last historical fiction before this was. Okay, so the last historical book I read was in November, so like 5-6 months ago. That was The Devil in the Dark Water, and to be honest, I would class that as its main genre as a mystery, and then the historical element, while very fun, exciting, and integral, was a secondary genre, I'd say. What's the last like actual historical fiction I read? Okay, so according to my reading spreadsheet from last year, I did not read a single book that I classed as historical fiction as its main genre, which is surprising. Like, I really didn't think it had been that long since I read a historical fiction book. So I guess this is here to buck that trend, reintroduce me to the genre, and let's just hope it stays interesting and it stays intriguing and it's more like the second chapter than the first. So it's now been like a week since I finished reading The Mad Woman's Ball, and I did not really love it in the end. It wasn't that great. I think I'm going to give it a 2.5 star rating because it was mostly fine, like bare minimum, it was fine, with some bits that were more than fine. And I've been having a lot of trouble putting together my thoughts on this and what exactly it was I didn't like. I mean, the writing was fine, the characters were fine, the plot even was fine, like, it was all fine. I like the fact that I could never really anticipate what was going to happen next, which was good, and it kept it intriguing and interesting all the way through. But I would say that this was more of an interesting book than an enjoyable one. I have one specific small gripe about this book, which is that while it's written in third person, it sometimes switches like third person perspectives in quite a confusing way. So it will have like a switch in the middle of a paragraph sometimes. So it will be sort of third person but inside Eugenie's head, one of the characters. And then at one point it will be like, Eugenie did this, Eugenie did that. And then it will go, the girl's side. And you think, oh, so it's talking about the other character in the scene, like it's talking about someone else. And then it will say, and she left the room. And you go, okay, so the other character, like Genevieve or another character in the scene, has left the room. But no, it was talking about Eugenie. But when it said the girl's side, it was talking about someone else. But then when it said she, it was talking about Eugenie again. And there were just a couple of little moments like that that were confusing. But maybe that's more of a translation issue because this is translated from French. Maybe the original French is not at all confusing, but I was confused. But to talk about what I think is my main big issue, I am going to have to talk spoilers because it's like all to do with the end of the book and you can't really discuss it without being spoilery. I'm sorry, but I will say that it's to do with kind of the whole point, the whole moral of the book, which just passed me by. I didn't get it, and if I got what I think I got, I don't like it. So, spoilers. So Eugenie is quite early on sent to the asylum because she says she can see ghosts. And at first you are not sure whether she is hallucinating or whether she actually can see ghosts, and there's like a paranormal element that you don't expect going in. But it is like halfway through pretty effectively proved that she can actually see ghosts, like when she sees her granddad's ghost and he tells her about this like lost necklace which she couldn't possibly have known about, and then she goes looking for it and she finds it, and then she sees Genevieve's sister's ghost, and the sister says that her and Genevieve's dad is ill, and Genevieve goes off and yes, he is ill, and there's no way Eugenie could have known, so it's proven, it's official, it's canon, Eugenie can see ghosts. And so the book presents it as morally wrong and incorrect that she has been locked up because she's not actually mentally ill, she is just able to communicate with the dead, and therefore in the book's logic she has no reason to be locked in the asylum. But the book doesn't act like it's wrong for anyone else to be locked up. It kind of says that Eugenie is the special case and she doesn't deserve to be there and she does not belong in the asylum, but kind of everyone else does. So I guess Eugenie's just too special and she's not like the other girls. And like even Genevieve, this character who is shown as being kind of heartless, and she's worked in the asylum and obeyed all of its like strict, often awful rules for what, like 15, 20 years. Like even she, when she first sees Eugenie, it's like, there's something different about this girl. I can tell she's not crazy. She's special. And so as the story goes on, and at the end when Genevieve helps Eugenie escape the asylum, this is portrayed as being morally right. This is the correct thing that should have happened. Eugenie does not deserve to be there. It is good and moral, and the whole point of her story that she left the asylum. But it then portrays Genevieve getting locked up in her place as also like the right ending for her, like the happy ending for her. It's like, oh yeah, she was more suited to living in the asylum. It turns out she was more suited for living in the asylum than her previous life, despite the fact this idea is never once mentioned or explored at all before the very end of the book. And to be fair, I did kind of see the twist coming where like I knew Eugenie would escape, and I guessed probably that Genevieve would end up being locked up in her place. And I was like, okay, so we're going for a sort of happy ending for a happy ending for Eugenie, a sad ending for Genevieve, and it's going to be like this contrast between the characters. It's going to be a very bittersweet ending to the book. That's what I expected. And that happened, except that Genevieve's ending is portrayed as her best option. It's portrayed as a happy ending for her. Even though her only like crime is helping Eugenie escape, yeah, sure, but also it's mainly portrayed as the fact that she believes Eugenie can see ghosts is the reason that she gets locked up, even though the book has proved that she can see ghosts. Therefore, by its own logic, shouldn't Genevieve be like another special case because she's not actually mentally ill and therefore doesn't deserve to be there? No. I mean, like, what am I missing? What am I missing? I try to make it make sense and it just doesn't. And it just kind of ruined the entire experience for me because I was like, I don't get the point. I don't get the point of the ending. It seemed very contradictory. I didn't like what it was trying to say about like who deserves to be locked up in an asylum and who doesn't. It was just very weird. It put a damper on the whole thing. It really needed a good ending to save the book. I thought like it was fine, but it needed a good ending to be anything other than fine, and it gave me that instead, and that is why it's getting 2.5 stars. So following that, we're going to jump straight into my April pick. The April prompt is to read a book with a size related word in the title. So anything like large, small, big, giant, massive, whatever. I am again bending the rules and I have chosen A Girl is a Half-Formed Thing by Ema McBride. I'm using half-formed to mean a size because half is a measure of amount, aka a measure of size, I'm saying. This is another very short book, lucky me, and this is about a girl and her brother and his childhood brain tumour. I don't know if that means that he dies when he's a child and the book follows that, or if it's following all of his life and it shows how the tumour affects him and by extension her and their family and their dynamic. I actually don't really know anything about this book other than it's quite highly acclaimed, it won lots of prizes, and I think I probably won't enjoy it. It is written in a weird style of writing, and it's literary fiction, which just like immediately plummets its chances of being something I'd actually enjoy. But I'm experimenting. I'm taking a risk with my reading to see if it will surprise me. So that's kind of unlikely, but fingers crossed. Let's see if it does happen. So what has happened is I read the first 10 pages of this book and it was interesting in that I think I could understand what was happening, just not who it was happening to. The perspectives were so confusing, I genuinely couldn't tell who I was meant to be reading from. I wasn't sure if it was the sister, the girl from the title, or her brother, or it was alternating between them, which is what I would have put my money on, or if it was just randomly bringing in other perspectives as well. Like I really couldn't tell. So in the end, I went and I Googled the critical analysis of this book because I realized that was the only way I was ever going to understand what was going on. And it turns out it was not switching perspectives at all. It was all from the sister. It was all from one character. And then while I was there, I read a bit of the analysis and explanation for the book, which obviously included spoilers because that's what happens when you Google what happens in a book. And after reading that and having some of my curiosity satisfied, a month passed and I never continued reading. Not because of the spoilers, not because that had ruined it for me in any way, but just because I didn't want to continue. And that's, you know, it's fine at the end of the day. Those 10 pages, the first 10 pages of this book, will forever remain the only 10 pages I ever read. And I guess what I've learnt is never take risks with your reading, never step outside your comfort zone, and never try anything new because it's probably not going to work out for you. But I didn't want to end this video on just me being like, oops, I never finished it. So I'm also going to talk about my May pick, which I have already read because, again, it was a very short book. So the May prompt was direction, so anything from, you know, north, south, up, down, backwards, forwards, anything like that. And I chose Down Among the Sticks and Bones by Shauna Maguire. This is the second book in the Wayward Children novella series, and the concept behind this series is that it's kind of inspired by stories like Narnia and Alice in Wonderland and The Wizard of Oz, where children find themselves magically transported through some kind of door or portal into a magical world. Except the main focus of this series is actually more on the children who find themselves coming back to our world after their adventures, which was often the first place for them where they ever felt like they were at home, where they truly belonged. So obviously they don't really want to be back in the real world. And it's children like that who get sent to this school called Eleanor West Home for Wayward Children, which is where they try to deal with the fact that their door is probably never going to open for them again. They're probably stuck back here forever in a life they don't really want, surrounded by people who never understand what they've been through. So the first book in this series is set in Eleanor West Home for Wayward Children, and two of the side characters are these sisters called Jack and Jill. And in this book, we get a prequel about their travels to their particular magical world and what happened. And we hear a bit about it in the first book of this series, but this one is like focused on them and really fills in all the gaps. And I thought it was actually very good. It was very creepy and interesting. I thought the worlds they traveled to, the moors, was really interesting. Kind of reminded me of like a classic horror story. Like I was picturing it, I was picturing the world like the first 10 minutes of the wonderfully terrible film Van Helsing, where the first bit's like all in black and white. That is how I was picturing the moors. And it perfectly balances this feeling of like creepy horror story vibes with feeling a bit like a fairy tale, to be honest, because the writing is so beautiful. It really felt like a modern fairy tale, like a new fairy tale. So I've given it 3 stars. It was a very quick read. I also really liked what it had to say about like girlhood and femininity and gender roles and useless prescriptivist parents, and how you can really screw up your children from doing anything like Jack and Jill's parents do in this book. I mean, it's a little short, but it's a novella. It's meant to be. It's like the perfect mouthful of a story. It's the perfect serving size. And I want to finish off this review with a brief tangent on some of the reviews I saw of this book on Goodreads. Like a couple of them, not many, but honestly too many, said something along the lines of, oh, you should read this book first. It's the second book in the series, but you should read it first because otherwise the first book spoils you on Jack and Jill's story. And I'm like, yeah, what do you think a prequel is? Is this a brand new concept? Do you not know how they work? This book isn't ruined by the fact that we already know what happens next to Jack and Jill because we read about it in the first book. Otherwise, I hope you're applying that logic to every prequel in existence ever. I mean, there's lots of reasons to complain about the Star Wars prequel trilogy, but is your main point that you didn't like it because it spoils Darth Vader as evil? Like, no, that's what prequels do. They go back and they tell you more of the story and they flesh out the world, and that's exactly what this did. It taught us so much about Jack and Jill and what they've been through. It was so interesting, and it was not ruined by the fact that we already know what happens next. This isn't a wasted ending of a book. It's almost tragic. It's like dramatic irony because we already know how that story ends and they have no idea, and that's what makes it so powerful. I am a strong advocate for reading books in publishing order, not necessarily in chronological order, because then that can really just mess things up. Like if the author wanted you to read a story first, they would have written and published it first. If this was meant to be the first book in the series, it would have been the first book in the series. I just feel very strongly about this. Like with the Narnia books, some people say that you should read The Magician's Nephew before you read The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe, and I'm like, are you insane? Don't do that. Read it in the correct order, please, I'm begging you. Anyway, I read this solid 3 stars. I actually have the next book in the series right here, Beneath the Sugar Sky, which I'm now very, very excited to dive into. So that is it for part 1 of my Buzzwordathon reading vlogs. I'm going to do a quick ranking of all of the books I've read so far in order of best to worst in my opinion. We started off strong, we finished slightly less strongly, I would say. But thank you so much for watching this video, and I will see you in my next one.